Now, a lot of people have been requesting a Caro-Kann with black. I listened to the requests, so we are going to play a Caro-Kann. Now, the Caro-Kann I will introduce historically after the game. But the idea is not hard to understand. You are prepared. It's one of those openings like the French. It's a cousin to the French. Completely different opening in spirit, but the fundamental logic behind it is the same. You are preparing the move d5. Playing d5 immediately is the Scandi. And already, this is not a very dangerous line for black. He's going knight f3, and he's giving up control of the center. Now we have a pawn in the center, and he doesn't. In addition, this knight can be pinned with bishop g4, which is kind of nasty in the Caro-Kann. So white should play d4 here, at least get a normal exchange Caro, which is not the most dangerous way to play the Caro-Kann. I'll introduce some of white's possibilities after the game. Drive a beige Volvo and listen to Vivaldi. Is that the person you think I am? Because you are sorely mistaken. Okay, bishop b5. How should we cover this? Not Lexus either. Never. Who do you think I am? Okay, bishop d7 or knight c6. Actually, both is fine, but I like bishop d7. Bishop d7 develops a piece and simultaneously essentially gets him to take the bishop, which allows us to develop the knight for free. Okay. Now, what I want you to understand is that in many openings, like the same principles apply as usual. So, for example, here, there's no special way in which we develop our pieces. We develop our pieces normally. Knight f6, e6, bishop d6. Just because it's a Caro-Kann doesn't mean you have to invent a whole new way of developing. And some people tend to think that openings are like, different cultures. Audi would be very nice, but maybe in the future. Where you have different languages and civilizations. But openings are more like, they have similarities, they have differences. Maybe cultures are a good comparison. Different languages, but languages have cognates. They have similarities. They have the same concepts. And you can think of openings in that way, I think. So bishop can come to several places. I like bishop d6 because it centralizes it. Bishop b4 is, I know, what a lot of people want to play. But if he castles out of the pin, I'm not sure that I want to take the knight. I'm not sure it's worth giving up the bishop in order to slightly damage his pawn structure. I don't particularly like that approach. You're close, Kentucky Fried Bishop. Bishop d6 is what we're going to do, and then we're going to castle. Okay. And I will reward myself. Well, knight b5 that's a good question, actually. Knight b5, bishop back to b8 is a good response, and then we can play a6 and then chase the knight back. At the end of the day, we're going to have... nobody's going to gain from this transaction. Okay. Yep, you got it. Stricali. Okay, so with that being said, let's continue bringing our pieces into the game. Yeah, rook c8, exactly. Yeah, Groovy, I was originally going to say that cultures is a bad analogy, but then I realized it's a good analogy, if you think of it the right way. Okay, knight e2. That's a good move, right? He potentially is getting the knight somewhere safe. But what does this allow us to play? We always, when we get into this early middle game, we start thinking, okay, what is the drawback of this move? What squares does it release? Yeah, knight e4, and then we can do the Pillsbury knight. If you guys remember from an earlier speedrun, a Pillsbury knight is a knight on e4 or e5 supported by neighboring pawns on f and d, which is what we're going to do. We don't need to play f5. I mean, the knight is defended perfectly well by the d pawn, but the additional benefit of f5, not only can the pawn go to f4, but also we can lift the rook up to h6. That's actually the tactical benefit of playing f5. Okay. Yeah. It's named after Harry Nelson Pillsbury, who was an American chess player from the early 1900s, late 1800s. Yeah, a lot of people might think, well, doesn't this weaken the king? And again, I've always emphasized the relativity of this kind of argument, right? The king can be weakened. You can run around in your apartment if you live alone without any clothes on, without going, without being punished. When you visit your parents or your family, you can't really do that, right? It's all relative. It depends on who's in the room. So, who's in the room here? Well, we've got a lot of our own pieces in the room. White doesn't have all that much beef going on the king's side, so we can afford this. Yeah, you guys know that was a good analogy. See, it's going to be memorable. What should we do? He does attack the e6 pawn. Mechanics Chess, my hometown chess club, rating with a party of 21. Thank you so much. How do we do several things at once? We defend the pawn, but we also want to advance our attacking agenda. How should we do that? I don't know your family. Well, I don't think I want to know. Yeah, so either a rook lift or a queen lift. I actually like the queen lift because that actually, how should I explain this? I guess not only does it defend the pawn, but the queen just seems to be a bit of a safer defender than the rook. Also, there's some part of me that's saying after rook f6, it puts the rook and the queen on the same file. Oh, sorry, on the same diagonal, and maybe there's some bishop g5 pin in the future. The same idea. We want to get the queen potentially to h6 so that it x-rays the h2 pawn. Okay. Yes, the rook is the better defender. That's a good point. But we are going to dispense with this knight. With what move? How are we going to get rid of the knight? And don't tell me bishop takes f4. This bishop is worth its weight in gold. If we take bishop takes f4, then we weaken the e5 square. Yeah, g5 is right. g5 chases the knight away, opens up the bishop, and then we can move our queen to h6, and the g5 pawn provides like an umbrella for the queen. How much does a bishop weigh? That's right. Okay, I hope everything is making sense, and I hope you guys are enjoying. I'm very happy to be back home, and we're going to keep grinding. Lots more to come. Thank you, everybody, for the support. We are holding strong in your 7,000 subs, which is amazing, and I really, really appreciate it. So we'll play this one game. We'll analyze, then we'll call it a night. But lots of streams coming up. Thank you, Kaisa3, for the tier 1. Yeah, I don't know what Leela recommends. Sorry for the glitch with the lack of blitz. Hopefully by the evening it will be restored. Night Spoon gifting. First gifted sub to Rave Day. Thank you so much. Rave the Day. Appreciate it. Okay, so g5 is coming up. Basically against anything he does. That's from the chess set. It's actually not a stoned, but it is a wooden set. It's a cool set. Okay, so g5. Here we go. Get out of here. Get out of f4. Opening up the bishop. And another sub. Bluish Bubble. Gifting to the Udjug. Really appreciate it. Okay. Excuse me. I also have to eat and stuff. And well, I already did, but more. Okay, knight e6. That is panic. That is just panic. That is why we put the queen on f6. This gives up a knight. Not sure what he sees here. I think knight g5 may have misled him. That actually ends up blundering another knight because the queens are in a standoff. Notice how I immediately point this out. Right. Because the moment I notice that, that gives you the power to control it. And he just kind of missed the mark here. This often happens. You panic and sort of things collapse. But at this point, White's position was already quite unpleasant. Although knight d3 would give a much better game than taking on e6. I mean, g4, maybe an f4 is coming in. This is very unpleasant for White, but the game would have went on had this happened. Okay, good game, DMD, I appreciate it. Now, a Caro-Kann is Caro-Kann, so it's not one word, and surprisingly, it is named after two people. You guys will never guess what their names are. Their names are Caro and Khan. I mean, amazing. Chess players are very original. Horatio Caro and Ilya Khan were two masters. They were not grandmasters. They were masters. And they lived in approximately the same time. Marcos Khan, 1820 to 1886, and Horatio Caro, English player, Austrian player, was Caro, 1862 to 1920. So 19th century, second half of the 19th century was when they both played the Caro Khan. As with so many other openings, neither Caro nor Khan was actually the first person to play the Caro Khan by a very wide margin. The first person to play the Caro Khan, 1845, a guy named Withers, John Withers, in a casual game in Bristol, England, played c6 and d5 against Elijah Williams. Thank you, DMD. My opponent gifting 5 my lands. Then Indian player Soma Karana played it in 1856. Szymon Winauer, one of the strongest Polish players, played it in 1883. And only in 1884, Marcos Khan plays the Caro Khan and loses his first game with it, but he stuck with it and won a couple others. No, I'm looking this up in ChessBase. I don't have this in my head, although that would be nice. Anyways, that is a little story of the Caro Khan. And why was it not played in the 1700s? Because that was back in the day when, not controlling the center was considered unacceptable. So that's why people played e5 exclusively, right? Because this controls more of the center. Then people started to realize, right, that it wasn't necessarily about the amount of the center you control, but about the quality of the central control. So d5 establishes a very nice stronghold. The Khan line in the Sicilian is named after Ilya Khan, I think. Russian player Ilya Khan. So basically, what is the drawback of the Caro Khan? I mean, I'm talking about it like it's the best opening. It's actually one of the best openings, I believe. Unlike the French, right? In the French, what is the main drawback of the French? Why don't more people play it from a positional standpoint? This is a very famous property of the French that dissuades a lot of people from playing it. It's the bishop, right? ChessKit is the ultimate authority on that. So the bishop is bad, the French bishop. In the Caro Khan, we circumvent this problem. So why doesn't everybody play the Caro Khan? Well, first of all, we take away the c6 square from our knight. The knight often has a very hard time getting active. It often has to go to d7, which is a more passive square. The second thing is that if white plays the advanced Caro, which is d4, and then e5. In the Caro Khan, we play bishop f5, right? That's the improvement over the French. But we've essentially spent a lot of time preparing this move. And what's going to happen is that in order to assail white's pawn chain, we're going to have to spend another move playing c5. Kind of playing it like a French, but down several tempi. So we do get the bishop out, but we pay a bunch of tempi for it, and this could give white a very big initiative in the opening if black is not very careful. White also has a big space advantage, and much like in the French, this d6 square is a very big weakness. Thank you, Ben I am, and thank you, Bahadur, for the raid with a party of 121. Thank you so much, Bahadur. I'm on the tail end of my stream, but I'm doing great. Thank you so much for the raid. Welcome, people. Big honor, always, to be raided by GM Bahadur Jabava, one of my heroes. Of course, I play the Jabava as one of my full-time openings. So thank you very much. And welcome people to the tail end of a speedrun. Today's stream is a little bit short. I just got off a plane, so 5-hour flights are not fun. But nonetheless, very happy to be streaming. Welcome everybody. Okay. So hopefully that makes some sense. Now, the way that white plays it, I recommend the two knights. That's a good way to play against the Caro without playing d4. Development first. That's gotten very popular recently. Maskell, thank you. And wow, I can't even keep up with this. Do belly zigzag gifting to Bahadur. Now this is not a terrible way to play it, but it's not very ambitious because now we get pawn on d5. We get more of the center, and we get quick development for our pieces. So this is about equal. Now, the move knight c3 is a positional inaccuracy. Could somebody explain to me why? Why is this move inaccurate? It's not a big mistake. It's not like a huge blunder, but it is inaccurate. Yeah, so you want to be able to move the c-pawn either to c3 in order to build up a pawn chain or to go c4 and assail the d5 pawn. Either way, I recommend c3 here. And then what move should white play? Which of these two pieces should he develop first? The bishop or the knight, and if so, where? Yeah, in the Jabava London, you do play knight c3, but there are extenuating circumstances that permit that. Yeah, definitely the bishop to f4 to stop bishop d6. If you move the knight first, you're going to have a hard time developing the bishop, and you let black have this very nice square. So this is equal. White's not worse there. Black is very comfortable, but that would create an equal position. The way that you develop DMD, it's not terrible, but it's a little bit passive. And already at this point, that knight could get in a meat grinder if I play bishop b4 at the right moment. And moving the knight is not bad, but now I get the Pillsbury knight. So I think your second mistake, which got you kind of on the brink, is probably here, although maybe the computer will find a way to get a good position for white even after knight f4. But I think knight f4 allows me to deploy my queen, and then this move g5 comes with great effect. It's a move with tempo. I want to play this move anyway. Now it happens with tempo. Could somebody propose an alternative? This is not an easy position to handle with white. But you guys should think of this in terms of eliminating black's strongest attacking pieces. We know that this bishop is a very annoying attacking piece that is the engine behind this entire attack because it pressures the f2 pawn. So I like the move bishop f4. Now, obviously, black could do the same thing, but with the bishops traded, that is a very important difference. How does that difference manifest itself? Let's say the same thing happens as in the game. And after knight d3, who can explain to me why the trade of dark squared bishops is so beneficial for white? What additional thing does white have here? And not a hard question. I'm setting you guys up here, of course, but I just want everybody to understand the e5 square is better controlled. So if we are to compare this position directly to this position, knight e5 is not, well, it's possible, but white's going to have to sack a pawn and he doesn't get control of that square. If you compare this to this position, with the absence of the bishops, white gets a counter outpost on e5. Furthermore, he can now chase away black's knight with f3. So I would not have done this had you gone bishop f4. I would have to play in a more restrained fashion. And the idea of knight d3, knight e5 is white's plan here. In addition, you can now play c3. So does that make sense? I probably would have played... What would I have played here? It's actually not that easy for black. Now, the computer likes g5 anyway. It's a very computerish approach. It wants to go here, and then it wants to basically orient itself toward an attack against white's king. I'm not sure that that's the best approach. I think a more human idea would be perhaps to just move the bishop away from d6 and then redeploy it to f6. And then from f6, it's going to be very hard to get rid of, right? White's not going to be able to play bishop g5. That is controlled. So that is one possibility. So that's essentially the arc of the game. The Caro-Kann is a very peaceful opening. You're not going to win too many quick games with it, but it is an opening that allows you to develop your positional knowledge, to develop your knowledge of how to develop your knowledge of development of pieces. And it is relatively theoretical at the high levels. So at the high levels, you have to know a ton of different variations. The advanced, this is like the open main line. There's even the fantasy, which is f3, where you try to control the center and have all of it. Also a very dangerous line, by the way. But at a 1600 level, I highly recommend it to players who are looking to get better at positional chess. You might lose a bunch of games at first. There's a steep learning curve, but you will get better at these positional concepts if you allow yourself to play these openings. The Narrow-Kann is queen f3. So that is, I think, formally called the Goldman variation. That's where you go queen f3, and you apply immediate pressure on this pawn. You try to get this pawn to move, so you can get the bishop out to c4 and attack f7. Not amazing. Black has many ways to equalize, but interesting. And this has a lot of traps. One of which is, of course, this line I've showed many times, where black kind of plays it like a French, thinking, this knight on c3 means white cannot play c3 and defend the pawn chain. White's pawn chain collapses. But of course, this crazy knight sally, two knight sallies win the game because of all of these threats. I've won several games like this. Okay, so that essentially is the arc of the game. Any questions before I end for today? So the exchange Caro is not nearly as boring as the exchange French. The exchange Caro is a very legitimate opening because it creates an imbalance, right? It creates a central imbalance where black is the e-pawn, white is the c-pawn. But the exchange French is, the Narrow-Kann. The exchange French is incredibly boring because it's symmetrical. That doesn't mean you can't play interesting games in the exchange French. That doesn't mean nobody should play the exchange French. It just means that's how you compare these. All right, guys.